Welcome, everyone, to Crew Call as we get set for Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Final game ever at Oracle Arena. The Toronto Raptors on the verge of their first ever NBA title. Leo, Sherm, Jonesy, E, Jacko, you know the crew. And for the Toronto Raptors, what a start. Let's dive right into this game. Leo, Kyle Lowry opens up that quarter and says, you know what? We ain't messing around. We're not thinking about a Game 7. We want to take it right now.
Think of how the playoffs started for the Toronto Raptors. Remember Kyle Lowry's first game in the playoffs with the Raptors. Everybody said, hey, Kyle, zero. How do you get a zero? Even though he does all these other things, just because the Raptors lose, Kyle Lowry is hung out to dry by a lot of fans. And I thought it was just perfect. Last game, Kyle Lowry just comes out, sets the tone, knocks down the jumpers. I mean, you could just feel, I think everybody on the Raptors just kind of looked at him and said, all right, man. Just kind of like you get the Kawhi and the Superman thing. You had Kyle say, hey, I need the suit right now because you guys jump on my shoulders. Pretty crazy when you think about it, Sherm.
Oh, no question about it. And you know, ripping off the first 8 points was phenomenal. Ending that first quarter with 15 points, going perfect 4-4 from the three-point line. Just a phenomenal job by Kyle being a leader that he is. And for once, we're talking about his points. I mean, usually we're talking about all the other things he does, which is just as valuable. But in a Game 6, a closeout game, leadership is very important, and it has to come from your best players. And I thought Kyle did a great job. And guys, to me, he exercised a lot of the demons of the opinions that people had about Kyle being able to perform on the highest stage. He definitely answered a lot of questions with the start of that sixth game, Jonesy.
Well, Sherm, it's funny because I use the expression a lot when it's closing time that people say, I always say, you can see the finish line right there. And you think about what kind of a year it's been. And as you said, over Kyle's career, a lot of people wanted to point at him. They always want to point at him, and you know, to whom much is given, much is expected. And Kyle just kind of comes out the same way. And I just thought in this game, we've all seen it, he came out with a little bit extra. He could see the finish line. And we know Kyle, don't think he wouldn't have loved to have hit the shot in the game before to close it out. And Kyle's that kind of guy. You knock him down and you say, okay, I got you down. He stands up and he says, no, I'm going to come right back at you. And I thought he did a great job of leading his team out of the gate and establishing the way the Raptors were going to play for this entire game, Jacko.
Yeah, leadership by example, right? And I mentioned this, I don't know if we were talking about Game 4 or Game 3, that's the guy I want with me on the road, right? And he set the tone as a leader, as a guy who's been with your program the longest. You know, he's put a lot of work in, and he a lot of sweat equity in terms of what the Toronto Raptor organization's all about. And you know, we had the discussion prior to this. What was it? Yes, you know, when we were talking about Game 4, I think it was talking about, you know, who gets the banner first, and as an example once again of why he should have the banner first, and Kyle Lowry, just how he performed. And to me as well, it's funny, it was interesting. My brother-in-law was visiting with his daughter on the West Coast looking at colleges, and he got 2 tickets to the game. And he said to me, he said, I don't know if I've ever seen a half in my life as intense as the first half of the Raptors Warriors in Game 6. It was a remarkable level of intensity in that building. And Eric, to me, it just blew me away that Kyle Lowry, I mean, he just came out and set the tone, not only for his team, but I think the Warrior guys are like, man, they're in our house and they're looking to get this right here and get it over with. I mean, everything was elevated right from the jump.
You know, I think Jacko and everybody's sort of touched on it to this point. To me, I think it's akin to what happened in Game 5 back in Toronto with Kevin Durant coming out and throwing those first punches and the Raptors having to match that intensity from the get-go. To your point, Kyle Lowry established the tone early. He came out throwing haymakers, and Golden State from the jump had to respond. and it turned into that dogfight right from the get-go. And I go back now to our last episode, and Maddie, you ended it talking about the what if. What if Kyle Lowry's shot had gone down, and what if, how things would have unfolded had Toronto won that game. To his credit, 48 hours later, there he was making the first shot and the second shot and the third shot and the fourth shot, and just saying, forget that I missed that shot. Forget that I potentially lost out on that moment. This is now the moment. Now's the time to get it done. And he put the team on his back in that opening quarter and drove them into the success that they ultimately had.
Look, he, as we know, is greatest Raptor of all time. And that if there were any doubts prior to that, that certainly was that moment, right? This is the moment. I'm taking control. I'm setting the tone, and we're here to close it out. Pascal Siakam, you go back. It's interesting when you look at the rotations of Game 6. We've talked so much about Nick Nurse. Nick was like, you know what? This is Game 6. We're going for it. Pascal played more than 46 minutes, Sherm, and he was big time in that game.
Oh, he was phenomenal. And, this was a matchup for Pascal with Draymond Green, where Draymond Green drummed up a lot of animosity, the fact that everyone was talking about Pascal Siakam. And Draymond's considered one of the elite defenders in this league. And, there's a play late in the fourth quarter out of a timeout where Pascal gets the ball on a clear out on Draymond Green. He drives hard right. Draymond tries to go underneath him. He gets that touch floater from about 8 to 10 feet, a tough shot under the circumstances, and he makes that basket. And to me, it just kind of culminated the fact that Pascal had arrived. Not only could he do it in the regular season, not only could he do it in the first round, the second round, the third round in the playoffs, when the lights were the brightest, his number was called and he delivered. To me, Pascal had an amazing playoff run for a guy who just continued to grow. And to me, that was kind of the catapult and kind of the jump off for Pascal to understand that this season was his time to prove to everybody that he could be that league guy, the top of the scouting report, and continue to deliver when his team needed him to, Leo.
Hey, well, you think about it. I mean, you're talking about playing on the biggest stage in the world, right? And here's Pascal. Opening game drops 32, set the tone for the series. Closing game drops 26. And you made that example, that shot he hit when he attacked Draymond Green. To me, that was a huge shot, much tougher than it looked. Even was a foul on Draymond Green. He hacked him on his way in. And you think about this. Draymond Green, we touched on this the other day. He seems to get so much respect, and rightfully so. I mean, he's a tremendous player in their system, but respect in the sense that people just don't attack him. Right? Why? I mean, yeah, he's a good defender, but he's also an undersized guy in the front line. And Pascal went at him all series long, put pressure on him, and didn't back away from that matchup. So you're talking about an elite defender going against a young buck trying to make himself a name in the NBA, and boy, did he. He stepped up in a way that really, when people want to question whether this season who's going to step up without Kawhi, well, you saw the blueprint right there. I mean, Pascal Siakam, he was just a monster in that game.
You mentioned the scoring, Leo, but the efficiency overall, too. You remember in that game 1, 14 of 17, I believe, 10 of 17 in game 6. Jonesy, you're always better at the math than me, but that's got to be damn near 65, 70% when you think about his numbers specifically going for the 26 and 10 in that game 6. And I think the fact that, we saw it in game 5 when he was attacking Kevin Durant and beating him down, defensively down on the post and going to the rim. And then to your point, Leo, we see it again in game 6, as we saw throughout the series, just going at Draymond Green. And I think that he put himself on the map last year as not just obviously the guy that ended up winning most improved player, but to me, if not the best, among the top 3-5 guys in the league in terms of the transition game, getting out and using his speed, using his length, using those herky-jerky moves. He's so unguardable against so many different people, and I think that was on full display at the most key times overall. But again, Jonesy, help me out with the numbers here. I think that's 24 of 34 in the bookend games of games 1 and 6.
That's not bad. That's 12 of 17, and it's close to 70%. It's between 66 and 70. So you get a check mark for your math, buddy. And I maybe your homeschooling's working. Maybe the teacher isn't drinking, right? Maybe look, guys.
Glad you didn't ask me that one.
To the point of Pascal Siakam, I look at the psychological and the qualitative part of this as well. We talked about, Leo, you talked about it. I mentioned it a couple of episodes ago. You got to go at Draymond Green. Pascal said to him with his play, I respect you. I know you're a good player. You're a champion, but I'm a good player too. And I'm aiming to be a champion, and I'm not afraid of you. And I think that the Warriors, maybe grudgingly, because they, I'm sure after game one, they said, well, he's not going to go 14 of 17 again. He can't keep this up. And it was almost as if Pascal's attitude was like, you guys haven't seen me do this. I can do this, and I'm going to do this. And when it's all said and done, you will understand that I'm a good player. I respect you guys, but I'm not afraid of you. And I think, that shot, Sherm, that you talked about, it resonated with me too. It's one of those when you're on the floor with a guy like that, Matty, and he makes a shot and you're on his team, you turn and you look at him, you go, man, this guy's big time. This guy is in it. And I think, again, I go back to the Raptors' resiliency and the pulling together attitude, and Pascal epitomized all of that, Matty.
Jack, another key component here in Game 6 was off of the bench and Fred VanVleet. And what a story from the standpoint of his entire 2-month run in the playoffs and the ups and the downs and the birth of his son, Fred Jr., as we've talked about before. But he made 5 threes off of the bench, and he was pivotal, Jack, in that Game 6 victory.
It's interesting. You look at him and Danny Green and Kyle Lowry. I think in Game 3 they were 14 to 25 from 3 in that game, or 11 to 25. They shot it well. Let's just say that. But I think back to the game at Milwaukee where he made 7 threes in Game 5. Excuse me. And then you look at what he did in Game 6. I go back to it again. There are certain guys that are wired to come up big on the road, and some guys shy away from the moment when they're on the road. He's a guy that lives with the shot. And, we talk about that term, and Matt, our good friend UB Brown, who actually gave Fred an MVP vote
That's right.
for the finals. I think that, talking to UB about it, I think he that was the attribute that he loved about VanVleet, was the fact that this guy's got big you-know-what, and he's willing to live with the success and or failure of the moment. And to me, I just think that's what makes Fred VanVleet so special. In a game you had to get to truly tip the series in Milwaukee in Game 5, he delivers. In Game 6 at Golden State, where you'd rather not have to play a Game 7 and you want to close the deal, who are the guys that just have that level of ruthlessness and ability to just say, it's over with, I'm getting it done? And to me, Eric, he delivered.
Well, and I'll tell you this, and I'm going to be guilty here of only looking at one end of the floor. So I will preface this by saying I'm not talking about the defense, not talking about the impact, not saying this critically. Kawhi Leonard was 0-4 offensively in that fourth quarter. His only points came at the free throw line in those clutch free throws, obviously, that iced the game at the end. Kyle Lowry was 1 of 3. That's 1 of 7 from your 1-2 punch. VanVleet stepping up with 12 points in that final frame. Not only what he did cumulatively, Jack, over the course of the game, but in that fourth quarter specifically, burying the 3 triples and just kind of leading the charge and big shot after big shot, big moment after big moment. And where would the Raptors have been without him, without their second unit, as we've talked about so many times in these crew calls, guys, Leo, that have stepped up over the course of this entire postseason run, where it wasn't just the 2 stars, the 2 all-stars, it was the total package that got the Raptors ultimately to the title.
Well, I tell you what, I want to talk the human side of it, right? First of all, Fred Jr. comes into the picture, and, Freddie has a big game, Milwaukee, and really that kind of turned things around for him. And remember, prior to that, man, people want to hang this kid out to dry. Hey, get him off the floor, bench him, why are you playing him? And again, you got to give credit to Nick Nurse for shutting out all the noise, trusting his guys, knowing who they are. He knows what Freddie's all about. Yeah, you have some struggles. Yeah, you're going through something, but you're still playing D. You're still playing the right way. And I know that when the time comes, you're going to bring it. And the time came. And you just look at the way he played. I mean, people don't even talk a lot about what he did defensively through this whole series. He was outstanding, man. He was in Curry's grill, Clay's grill. It didn't matter. He was in their grill the whole time, not giving him anything easy. And then you come up with this big offensive output. And again, him and Pascal, they really were the story to close this game out in the fourth quarter. And that's impressive. And again, for a guy that went through as much of a roller coaster ride in this playoffs, it was great to see him finish on such a high note, Matty.
You know, we could spend 10 hours talking about this game 6. There were so many different storylines, inclusive of Klay Thompson, right, going down and then coming back, taking those free throws. But I really would love to get all of your perspective on what it meant. And I get goosebumps when we start talking about this, because there were agonizing seconds, minutes to end that game finally in game 6. As we know, it seemed to play out forever. And it's interesting because rewatching all of this, I think back to even game 6 against the Milwaukee Bucks, how long that took to play out before the Raptors captured it. Sherm, this kind of played out the same way, but they do get the NBA title. And what did that mean to you?
Well, it meant a lot, Matty. But just to touch on Fred VanVleet again, you know, since Fred Jr. was born, the 9 games after that, Fred VanVleet shot over 53% from the three-point line. So the moral of the story is Fred's got to get to work during isolation and have some more babies to continue to shoot the ball well. But guys, honestly, in terms of what it meant, it was all you guys know. We've been covering this team for years. We all love the game of basketball. But there's something about the team that comes from where you're from, getting to the top of the mountain and telling the world they're the best. It means something. And, you know, you guys all went through it. People were congratulating us, and I found myself saying, well, I didn't really do anything. Like, those guys won the championship. But when you think of a big picture, being a part of that process, it was an honor and a privilege to be along for the ride. We went through the tough years of this team not doing well to get to the point where they win a championship. And then personally, as a Canadian, to have the world, the basketball world, look at our city, our province, our country, and give them the respect that we deserve, and we've deserved for a long time, meant a lot. It was real emotional, and at times I felt a bit overwhelmed by the moment. Standing on the court, the confetti is falling, the stage is built, they're handing out the trophy, and they're doing the whole ceremony. And sometimes I couldn't understand if it was real. I really needed something tangible, and it was just an amazing feeling. And Ian, being a fellow Canadian, you understand what I'm talking about.
Well, Sherm, you just said that a line that I used in my final call, and I know, Matty, you know, you the same thing, trying to find the words and just letting the words come to you in that moment. But I said that on the radio call. A city, a province, a country celebrates, and it truly became that, not only last season, but I think it's been brewing for a few years now, where we all saw this thing grow from, you know, a Toronto thing to a GTA thing, to finally became more of a Southern Ontario thing, and then all right, now it's a provincial thing, and now it's starting to extend into Quebec and into other areas. Okay, and now over the years it built and it brewed till it finally became this national thing, coast to coast, where Raptors fans were coming from every angle, from every corner of the country, and to see that culminate, as we talked about earlier in the series, with the O Canada being sung at Oracle. It happened again after game 6 and the celebrations and the party that was going down. I know for me personally, for 20 plus years covering the team and calling the games alongside Jonesy, to be a part of that moment and know that you're a part of history yourself was a special feeling. And I'll tell you as well, I'll throw it to Jonesy, as I did on the broadcast, to play traffic cop on the radio call, at least, in terms of having the final call, but then in the midst of the hype and the celebration, knowing we're still live on the air, and Jonesy's grabbing a headset and going down with the microphone, and he's down now in the mix. And to know that a day one guy is right down there, you know, in the party, in the confetti, doing the interviews, and I'm just kind of living it as I said, as I play traffic cop on the radio and listening to Jonesy do these interviews and getting the reactions from the players and coaches immediately, it was a special moment, Jonesy.
It was, E. And I'll say this, it's as Sherm pointed out, it's almost surreal. You kind of look back at it now as almost an out-of-body experience. Like, did that really happen? And, you know, you see the championship T-shirts months and years later, and you walk into Scotiabank Arena and you see the banner. And, you know, Leo, I've talked about this before, the fact that, you know, in 95 when Ewing and Oakley and Mason, the Knicks, and Shaq and Penny and Jordan and the Bulls and Malone and Stockton, and they were just kicking the crud out of the Raptors. And I've said this before, they were in the same league, but they weren't in the same league. And you could never have envisioned this. And it just took a long time to systematically build it. Yes, there was luck involved. And when I stood on the floor there, as Eric threw it down to me, he had to ask me a couple times, Jonesy, are you there? I was a fan. I was kind of caught up in the moment, looking at the stage, and it's a scene you've seen your whole life. And wow, that's the Toronto Raptors on the stage. And seeing the excitement and the joy. I think Serge was the first guy I talked to, and he had no words. He had his hand on his head, and he kept saying, I can't believe it. And then I stuck the mic in Bobby Webster's face, and I think he cursed. He said, Jonesy, we did it. And just the joy and the euphoria. And then to share it with you guys, you know, because as Sherm said, as Eric said, we've all been there, to share it with you guys. And some of the guys behind the scenes on this camera, David Leader, you know, Dan Gladman, Chris Phillips, John Russin, you know, Travis Stone. I like all the guys, we sit at the back of the plane and we go through it. And somebody said, run to the Raiders locker room. That's where the trophy is. And I've got that picture with all of us standing there with the trophy. And it's almost like an out-of-body experience. And the joy from it will never, ever cease. And it can be never taken away, Leo. And that's the great thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of layers to this, Jonesy. I want to give Jack a shot at this too, so I don't want to go too long. But you think about this, a lot of people don't know it. All the local broadcasts in the NBA stop after the first round, right? And then it's all the national broadcasts, ESPN, TNT, ABC. So all the guys that do games all season long, they're done after the first round. We got to go right to the end because we're Canada, we're national. So we got to experience this thing firsthand. And I think that's why Sherm mentioned people come up to us and, yeah, you know, coming up and saying congrats. You know, they could feel it as much as we could feel it. And it was special that we all had that unbelievable opportunity. But, you know, you think we saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, Jonesy and I, we're day oneers, man. We saw it all. And you relive all that. At the same time, you're looking at the whole big picture. It's Canada's team. And I think of the game, you know, what the NBA did coming to Canada in 95. And this is the 2-0 version, man. We don't even know the impact of this yet. It's coming. It's coming. But you got to remember, when over half of the country watches the NBA Finals, there's people that were never introduced to this game before, that didn't know anything about this game, now are in this game, and their kids are going to be in this game, and the interest is peaking. So, so much happened. And to be a part of this in any way, shape, or form, it really is like living a dream. And I agree about the surreal aspect of it, that I 100% believe the Raptors were going to win this. But after it was all over, you're still sitting there going, I remember in the summertime I'm going, NBA champions. Jacko, NBA champions.
Well, you know, two things jumped out to me. I'll never forget Matt starting the telecast that night. And I can't remember the exact number. I know it was north of 50, talking about the number of official watch parties across
59,
the country.
59.
Okay. And, you know, so that's 59 official watch parties. And Lord knows how many unofficial. That blew me away. Like, just to think, like, oh my goodness, you know, we have a whole nation watching us. This is, you know, the gold medal game. This is the World Cup final. This is Game 7 of the World Series. Whatever, you know, the Super Bowl, whatever you think of, and you're like, how did I get here? You know, this is it's remarkable. And number two, I think so often we spend time focusing on the players, and they're the guys that are out there doing it between the lines, and they deserve overwhelmingly the credit. At the same time, let's not forget the coaches, the support staff, management that did an amazing job of putting this whole thing together over a course of time. And then last but not least, ownership. I think when you talk about commitment to winning, and there are certain teams in pro sports, whether it be the NBA or wherever you want to look, that they're not well put together on the top. And, and we know in the NBA, particularly this culture, you got to spend. We talk about the luxury tax and the commitment to winning. There is a financial price that has to be paid as well. And, for Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster and their management staff to have that collaborative partnership with ownership to say, this is our vision and we think we can do this, but we need to partner and do this. And it's going to cost some money to do it, but we can do it. And to have that green light and say, go do it, to me, it was everybody involved. And to me, just to be a small part of it, it was just a remarkable thing to witness. And Matt, your call at the end of the game was just fabulous.
Well, thanks, Jack. I wanted to wait until there were zeros on the clock. I didn't want to sell it early. I wanted to wait, and I wanted to see no time left before, and I'm sure, Eric, you thought about that as well, before you share what your final thoughts are. And I have to say, and I hope fans get a chance tonight, because I've rewatched the games, and I hope that Chris Phillips, our director, did a sensational job capturing
DP
on the court, because in those moments you make your call, and then pictures on the television side are worth 1,000 words, right? And he did a magnificent job, I thought, of bringing everybody onto the floor. And this was not planned. He started taking cuts and shots of different players, and it allowed me, after all of this, to just tell a brief little story about their personal journey. And there's a point where you have Masai, and I said, he was prophetic. We will win. We will win. And you think about his journey, and Kyle and Kawhi and Danny, Fred, everyone, right? Pascal. It was phenomenal television, and it was an amazing moment. There's no question about it. And what is so, just so magical about it is that we shared it with everybody in Canada, and all Canadians and all Toronto Raptor fans. And that, to me, was so special, just so much like what's happening now, right? Everybody be safe. Everybody take care. And we thank all of you that have joined us on Crew Call. And who knows, maybe we'll have a few more down the line. But the Toronto Raptors, they get it done.
Hey, Matt,
Leo's about to get it done.
With the game coming on tonight, is it too early to start right now? So it's a replay. And we replay
Hey, Jacko.
right now one more time.
What's the line, Jacko? It's 5 o'clock somewhere? It's 5 o'clock somewhere?
It's 1 o'clock everywhere.
Man.
Canada, the NBA title is yours. The Toronto Raptors are the 2019 NBA champions.